All right, we are back for another edition of Sunday Night Astro Live. How is everyone? I'm going to crack a cold one. Oh, yeah. Kirkland sparkling water. Back for another edition of. Let me turn my volume down here. All right. So how is everybody? We are coming through the weekend here. And new moon, Aquarius, officially the year of the water rabbit. Watership down. Wasn't that a story about rabbits, I think? Rabbits, water, year of the water rabbit. Pisces, Saturn and Pisces is coming, and we have Aquarius, the water bearer, which is now fully engaged for the next 26 days, right? Here's Aquarius. So while people show up and populate the chat, let's kind of go over what we're going to talk about tonight. And welcome to the show. It's always great for me to be here with you on Sunday, and I'm always thoroughly surprised by how many people show up and congregate and hang out, and it's always great to see it. And I feel really blessed to have like 500 friends show up here in my 11th house, which is where I have my Mercury, Moon, and Venus. So it fits, it works. And it's always great here on Sunday night. So I'm not going to have a terribly long show tonight. I went 3.5 hours last week, and I really tried to connect some dots with the energy of the French Revolution and some of the main players. If you didn't see last week's show and you're interested in that sort of thing, you may want to check it out and maybe skip to the part where I start to get into the French Revolution, because it's really interesting, and especially some of the main players that were the firebrands of the French Revolution, and how they were born with Pluto and Sagittarius, which we now see a current generation of Zoomer kids born under the same sign. And in fact, Uranus and Pisces, which I believe Robespierre and Danton share, that's also kind of a wedge within the Gen Z group that have Pluto and Sag, Uranus and Aquarius, Neptune in Aquarius, and then Uranus and Pisces, because Uranus goes through actually 3 separate ingresses with Gen Z. The early one, I believe, I'm not mistaken, Uranus in Capricorn, or it's close, but the majority is Uranus in Aquarius and Uranus and Pisces. So when you look at those characters, you say, oh wow, they were early Gen Z. But the difference between them and the Gen Z that we have now is the position of Neptune, which is quite different, because Robespierre and Danton had Neptune in Leo. So, that's about dissolving things like monarchies and hierarchies and structures for better or worse. And if you're asking me, I think it's probably worse. But that's what they were attuned to with Neptune, whereas this version of Gen Z has Neptune in Aquarius, which is very interesting if we kind of look at how all of this has been set up. And it's been set up in a way so that, and I'm going to get into the World Economic Forum, which is an Aquarian group. I mean, all groups are Aquarian, but the World Economic Forum is clearly an Aquarian group because they have a vision for the future. There's kind of the end of the old order and the beginning of a new order, which again tends to be very Aquarian. Is it any different than the French Revolution and what was happening then? Not really. Not really, except instead of monarchies, I would say that whatever kind of goals or plans that the World Economic Forum has to do with monocultures instead of monarchies. So they want to break down monocultures. Coming up here, look who's here. It's the Astro Cat. Boy, does he look ready to go. You look dialed in tonight. Yes, you do. Look at that. His eyes are wide open. He looks dialed in. Oh, now he's fierce. You feeling fierce? Yeah. I'm going to put you over here because you like to hang out over here. So they're going after monocultures, not monarchies. They already laid waste to the monarchy. They're the new monarchies. They're the new monarchies hanging out, occulted inside of their weird little group. But it didn't go very well for the World Economic Forum this week. And I'm going to kind of get into that a little bit and why I think this whole idea of Build Back Better and the Aquarian version or vision of the greater good is not going to play out, and it's not going to play out well. And are we going to have some major hiccups in terms of our life along the way? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I totally believe that. But I don't think it's going to go down the way they want it. And that's very Aquarian when you think about it, right? So I'm going to try to look at as much of the Aquarian stuff from a number of different angles as we can tonight. And hopefully when you come away at the end of the show, you'll have, I think, perhaps a more 360-degree view of the Aquarian energy and how it's, in a lot of ways, really hard to control. It's very hard to control. And when people set out to do a certain thing in a certain way with it, especially now because of the Pluto ingress, it's a really good chance it won't happen that way. And there's a few things I'll bring up today or tonight in the current schema, which will give us some examples of it. But we're also going to look at some individuals who are Aquarians, and they're really fascinating patterns when it comes to some of these individuals that are very discernible. And it's almost like they come in weird groups and weird sets. And I'll give you one right off the top. The famous basketball player, Michael Jordan, is an Aquarian. But one of the most popular actors in Hollywood right now, his name is Michael B. Jordan, and he's also an Aquarian. So there's weird little things like that. And then you can see where there are certain athletes that are what I would call activist athletes. And some of them stay on the same activist path that they were when they started off, and others change radically, which is also very much connected to Aquarius. And activism, you'll see here over the course of the next 90 minutes or so, plays a pretty significant role. So does science, and so does government, and so does entertainment. So welcome to Sunday Night Astro Live. And tonight's show is Aquarius, Rebel, Reformer, and Reprobate. So let's get into it, as they say on the internets. Before I jump into Chattaria, of course, I want to bring up the sponsor of the show, and that would be True Hemp Science. And True Hemp Science is owned and operated by my good buddy Chris, who has been working assiduously at perfecting his CBD products. And I don't think you'll find another CBD researcher, producer, and somebody who knows the ins and outs of the molecules and the cannabinoids and everything that goes into the structure around CBD and some of the related products like CBGA. And of course, I can't mention the show without talking about the gummies, which are my absolute favorite. That's under the edible section here. So here we go. We've got the gummies. We've got 100 milligram. We've got 1500 milligram. Now you want a whopping gummy right there, and then you got 2500 milligram. Holy smokes! Looks like Chris is running a little bit of a discount. So there's plenty of different gummies that if you wanted to jump in and try some, he's got the 2-pack, which will give you kind of an idea as to what the experience is like. He's got the jar of the non-detect THC, CBD, spectrum hemp extract, black cherry. I prefer the black cherry, although the black cherry, what is it, tangerine or orange, I really like as well. The orange is good. So if you're into looking for a solution to help you sleep at night, I would say look no further, because these gummies are very effective. Over here, we have the moon dust, which is a little bit different. You don't want to take this at night. You want to take this during the day. It has a bit of an opposite effect and gives you a little bit of clarity. And Chris was experimenting with some moon dust gummies, but because the oil is so thick on them, he has to find a more robust piece of machinery to be able to pump them out. But he's still working on that. But there's all kinds of things here. You get the water soluble stuff. If you have an issue with some of the alcohol based CBD, he's got the water tech nano emulsified, and those are 2 different options there. So also he has fulvic acid, a really good deal on fulvic acid and oceanic minerals and the bioactive silica. So there's some really interesting products over here on True Hemp Science. Here's what you do. Go to truehempscience.com/ref/23, truehempscience.com/ref/23. And if you spend $100 and type in 15 mins, that's 15 MINS, when you check out, you'll get free product. And Chris is pretty generous with the free product. So it's always cool because, sometimes he'll tell you, if you call up, he'll tell you, hey, I'll throw in a little this or a little that. Or if you just do it, your package shows up. It's kind of like Christmas. It's like, what did I get today? Oh, I got this and I got this. Cool. I can't wait to try this out. And if you spend $150 or more, you get free shipping as well. So there you go. True Hemp Science, a sponsor of Sunday Night Astro Live. Jasper, we've never had you CBD'd up, have we? We might have to do that. We might have to give you some pet sounds. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Who do we have here tonight? Which one of you shining stars has beamed in? We got DJ MC, the lovely and talented one. Dr. Joan S. is here. Knight of Cups, double B, Beth Berry. There she is. Michelle on wheels, rocking a wench. Good evening, Michi. JJ, Rain, DeBlanc. Were your ears better last night, JJ? We were talking about you. We were talking about you over dinner. We had dinner last night with Emily Moyer and Laura. And JJ, your name came up more than once in a good way. There's my man, Ryan. Always good to have him in the chat working the wrench. Good evening, Ryan. Liz Leonard. Hi, Liz. Speaking of talent, there's a caricaturist with character. That's Mark S. beaming in from BC. Welcome, brother Mark. Celeste Loveheart. Hello, Celeste. Welcome. Arlene Vega. Greetings, Arlene. Good to see you. David Hawk. Hey, David. Nice to have you show up here. Peter Bayonne. Hey, this freakazoid is doing A-OK. Let's see who else we have. Susie Gemini. Susie Gemini always bringing the hearts. MB's here. Meow meow. I guess Jasper showed up when Meow Meow arrived. There he is, the shadow man himself, Benito Diaz. What's going on, Benito? Flat Earth Hippie, top of the day. We must be somewhere in another part of the world. Wishing you a very good day wherever you are. FEH. Lunar New Year shooting in LA with weirdness to it. Yeah, they had another event, shall we say an event in Atlanta over the weekend. So the season of radical rabble rousing is upon us yet again. Yes, I know. I know. Yeah, you're no radical rabble rouser. You're a lover. Apparently, they've had riots all weekend in Atlanta. It's riot season. It's Aquarius. It's riot season. Denise Woolsey, haven't seen you in a while. Hi, Denise. Good to see you. Rob Chopra, what's happening, Rob? Happy Sunday back at you. Speaking of Aquarius, we got Aquarian Rob in the house. Kelly B, our resident borderline Gen X millennial Scorpio music lover. Always good to see you, Kelly. Welcome. Marie MacArthur is here. Hi, Marie, Warrior of Light. Whoa, checking in. All right. Amy, the cheeky one. What's going on, Scoobs? Sandra Deb, Joe Williams. Boy, we got a packed house here tonight. Looking good. We got the manifester from Chesapeake Bay. That's Cheryl Loshiava. What's going on, Cheryl? Shirley. I call her Cheryl. Shirley. Shirley, I should call you by your correct first name. Somehow Cheryl pops out. There's fantastic CC Jones. She's here. Magic Cat. That's with a CK, by the way, for keeping score at home. Let's see. Southwest Florida. What's up with Florida real estate? Here we go. Here's our report. Real estate still moving in Southwest Florida. Major positive energies for work the last few days, although some delays on contracts getting signed. Best January I have ever had. That's pretty good because before that, there's a bit of a trough there. Maybe that had to do with the holidays. So if you want your Western Florida real estate needs met, check out Lewis Walden. He's your man in Southwest Florida. I should say Southwest Florida needs. Tom Jordan is here. We were talking about Michael Jordan earlier. We got Tom Jordan. Who needs Mike when we got Tom? Let's see. Who else do we have? Any new names? Any new names? Any new names? Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis. Loved you as a Raven, Ray. Loved you as a Raven. Let's see, who else do we have? Padrita. She said she'd be on the chat. And there she is. What's going on, Padrita Pebbles? Welcome back. Welcome back to the US of A. Marty R. Checking in from the 916. Am I right, Marty? Is that your zip code out, area code out there? 916? Sacramento, California, the capital city. Let's see. Mary Lee is here. Hi, Mary. Jesse, nothing, 33. Steve Borg Resistance. I have to be here to calm down. Steve, we'll do our best. Jasper will send you calming vibes, not commie vibes, although in the Aquarian cycle, that's probably not too far afield. Elizabeth Donnell. Hey, what's going on? Elizabeth's in the house. Good to see her. Rizzy Beth H. We got a good crew here tonight. I contend that this might be the smartest chat on the internet. And I know there are some smart chats, but you guys are on another level. Esley, Dawn, who else are left out? Jonathan Picone. Hello, Jonathan. Kind of skipped over. Watch 2 Buffalo Bills games on to next season. Molecules. Yes, Mole. Buffalo lost in the snow. Lost in the snow. There will be no weird playoff game in Atlanta. Cincinnati saw to that. Erica, oh hi, yesa, you did make it. You're here. Welcome. Let's see, did I miss anybody? I think you're all present accounted for. I think you're all there. Oh, where did I go? Hold on. Where did I go? Here I am. Get that chat back. I think we're up. I think we're up to speed. Yes, 916. I've showed a lot of people your new show. Well, thanks, Marty R. Yeah, if you guys haven't caught up with my show that I do Tuesday through Friday, it's called Astro Weather, and it's a pretty quick show. I just kind of look at what's going on up there, in there, and do my best to give people my take and insight onto about where the energy for the day is. And then we also look at one person each day called the star of the day, which I love to do. And because it's really fun looking at these characters and looking at their charts. And, oh yeah, look at that. And I try to pick from a pretty eclectic range of zeros and heroes, right? So this last week we looked at Jeffrey Epstein. I think he was on the list, and I think he was Friday. I think Epstein was Friday. There's a lot of really interesting Aquarians, but then that would be an understatement. It's an interesting sign, and a sign that I think is really paradoxical, because my experience with, personally and collectively with Aquarians is that they are kind of hell-bent on finding where they are in the group or the collective. But then they also have that Leo back end. So they're trying to both be a part of something, but stand out at the same time, right? So a lot of people understand this, but I believe the sun is in its fall in Aquarius, because the sun is dignified in Leo. So the opposite side, it's in its fall. So we all know that, as a sun sign, the idea is to express the essence of your sun sign. That's what it's about. The sun is illuminating like where you were on that day and the qualities that are associated with it, right? So that's what Aquarius is supposed to do. But at the same time, they're also supposed to find their niche and their place within kind of the social spectra. So they tend to be a bit paradoxical. And one of the Aquarians that I talk about when it comes to this dynamic is Johnny Rotten of the Sex Pistols. To me, he is the archetypal Aquarian, because he's really like there were, the Ramones were a punk rock group, and they predated the Sex Pistols. Iggy Pop is kind of proto-punk, right? And he predates the Sex Pistols. You have the New York Dolls, who are kind of a glam punk band, predate the Sex Pistols. And even in the punk rock world, you have, I think, the first punk rock single was released by The Damned. And I think they beat the Sex Pistols by 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. So there are other people in that space that occupy that space prior to the Sex Pistols, but nobody occupies that space quite like Johnny Rotten. And even his song Anarchy in the UK is an Aquarian manifesto. I mean, it doesn't get much more Aquarian than Anarchy in the UK. And he was a really, really difficult character. He still is a difficult character. So what do you have? You have this guy who basically wants to blow everything up, writes a very incendiary song about the Queen. Nobody had ever done that before, right? That's sacrilegious in terms of British culture. And what does Rotten do? He just, no problem. This is what we're writing about, and this is what we're playing, and we're going to light it up and burn it all down. And so he also changed the band, and you could throw Malcolm McLaren in there with them. The band changes music. Like there's with the Sex Pistols, there's like a before and an after. And this is, in a lot of ways, what Aquarius is about. Right. So it's the water bearer. It's the bringing of something new. And even if it was with Johnny Rotten and the Sex Pistols, and, instead of water, he was bearing, beer, piss, spit, whatever. Right. That was the baptism of the new canon for music. I mean, it is a before and after. And there's a scene in the movie 24 Hour Party People where they've just seen the Sex Pistols in Manchester. It's one of those kind of seminal concerts. You have people inside the audience like Howard Devoto and the Buzzcocks. Mick Hucknall simply read the Buzzcocks. Well, the Buzzcocks are there. They're putting the show on. So it's very interesting. Martin Hannett, who will wind up producing a number of records for Factory, including Joy Division, he's in the audience. And so they come back to the apartment, and Tony's buddy goes, it's his apartment. He's going around and he's looking at the posters on the wall, and he's, they're rock and roll posters, and he's tearing them down, right? Because it's the old order. Tony Wilson becomes a big player in, what happens after the Sex Pistols with the whole Manchester scene and the Hacienda. I mean, this is really a moment, right? And his buddy gets to David Bowie, and he's like, should I? And then rip, down comes Bowie. And that was the effect that the Sex Pistols had. In being very Aquarian, they do a tour of America, a very weird tour of America, playing strange places like Dallas, Atlanta, Memphis, really out of the way places. So it was almost like Warner Brothers, the label they were on, were like, yeah, you're going to tour, but we're not going to really get behind this because we're not sure if we really want you to be successful. So Warner's was kind of at odds with the band. And then the band was at odds with their manager, and the manager was at odds with the label. And they'd gone through, that was their third contract, I think. Warner's was their third label. So they wind up in San Francisco, one tour, and then that's it. They're done. One record, one tour, Aquarian lead band, and music has changed forever, for better or worse. And that's how Aquarius operates. Johnny Rotten was, he was a destroyer. He was a destroyer and a creator. But that's what we get with Aquarius. It's a really interesting sign. I find it to be one of the more, I think all the signs are fascinating. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people say, oh, you don't like so-and-so. Oh, you don't like Geminis. I like Geminis. I really do. I think they're really fascinating and interesting. I also see where there is this weird thing with Gemini in the play of duality in our reality. And it's magical, right? There's like this magical kind of juxtaposition with Gemini. It's almost as if using the energy of the polarity as a field to create distortion, illusion, all these different things that go along with it. And in fact, I've talked about the movie The Prestige quite a bit lately. And one of the magicians in The Prestige is played by an Aquarian, Christian Bale. And again, you're dealing with a Gemini world of doubles and illusions. And that movie is fantastic. So I'm not down on any sign. Trust me, I'm not. I think they're all fascinating in their own way. But Aquarius is, to me, the sign that is enigmatic. Of all the astrological science, Aquarius is the most enigmatic. And I have said this before on a number of shows, that even when you think you know an Aquarian, you don't really know them. And they can be very pleasant. There's a guy that I used to, we had this very Aquarian kind of friendship, right? Very Aquarian kind of friendship. And we haven't done it in a while, but every August, he would come to me, he'd say, hey, are you into playing fantasy football this year? I say, yeah, let's do it, right? So he and I would team up and we would play in a for money league. And we actually did pretty well. And by the time I decided that I didn't want to be a part of that scene anymore, because I really didn't want to watch a bunch of games, support the NFL, because I thought what they were doing was just ridiculous, like all these other major sports leagues. I tapped out. And I think he did too. It was like our time, right? But he was an Aquarian. And every time, fantasy football season would roll around, we'd connect. And, rarely were we ever in the same space. Although I knew him from when I worked with him back, and he's a super nice guy. So we had this virtual kind of friendship, right? We would, I said, what about this guy? What about this guy? What do you think? I'm going to drop him. I got this guy, fingered on waivers. What do you think? Yeah, I get him. Right. So, and then we did things that were, I'm not here to toot my fantasy football horn, but maybe it's because he's an Aquarian, or I got some interesting stuff with Aquarius in my chart. We did things with fantasy football that were way ahead of what people are doing now. And there's a whole strategy in fantasy football called zero backs. And I don't mean to bore you here, but it's an Aquarian thing, right? So in fantasy football, there was always, well, you got to draft a running back first, because the running backs score touchdowns, and you win when you score more touchdowns than other people in fantasy football. And I remember we were in this one draft, and we were picking really low. And I said to him, I said, look, a lot of these running backs are really good. We're going to be gone. I tell you what, let's do this. Let's focus on wide receivers and quarterbacks, and then we'll backfill the running back stuff. He said, okay. And we did that, and people thought we were nuts. And I don't think we won that year, but I think we came in second, if I'm not mistaken. And then another year we did the same thing. We drafted our quarterbacks last, and we actually won the whole damn thing. So that, and I was with an Aquarian buddy doing this stuff, right? So we were, and now zero backs is a big strategy, and we were doing zero backs back in the mid 2000s, and everybody thought we were crazy. But that's Aquarius too. People will think you're crazy, and well, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? And it's like, well, we're playing with reality. We're ahead of the curve here a little bit. We're figuring out where everybody else is, and we're going to be over here, because all you guys are searching for gold in this area. We're going to search for gold over here. And that even gets into, I promise I'll break out of sports, but that even gets into what they call analytics and Moneyball, which was pioneered by the Oakland A's. Now, Billy Beane is not an Aquarian. It'd be great if he was, but he's not. But that's the whole idea around analytics. And Aquarius is scientific. It uses data. It uses analytics. Look at Silicon Valley, right? Silicon Valley is the Hollywood of the Aquarian age. And that's what it's powered by. It's powered by data, analytics, algorithms, soon to be AI. That's all Aquarian brain trust. That total Aquarian brain trust. Now, some of that they would use back in the days of television, and they would have things like the Nielsen ratings. But even then, they would say, oh, well, this show was really successful. Why don't we just do another show like this, because it was really successful and it got all these eyeballs, and well, it wasn't as successful as the show that they thought they could emulate or copy. And there was a period there for copycat for a while where being a copycat was kind of in vogue, and people couldn't get enough of a certain genre, but they would try to replicate certain things, and it just wouldn't happen. So they couldn't do it all the time with TV, right? Like they could only have so many versions of Knots Landing before people were like, no, we're not into this. You know, the tide, you know, the cheese has moved and the tide has changed. So, oh, we decided to come up with, I don't know, Falcon Crest or whatever, and mildly successful, but now in terms of analytics in baseball, this is exactly what Aquarius does, and I'll try to walk you through it. So the Oakland A's are a team consistently in the lower third, deep lower third of income. And at some point, they realized that they could not compete with other teams to find talent that because their payroll was so low. So they decided to employ a different approach. And they decided to employ an approach that was based less on typical scouting and how players were deemed to be good or worthy of long-term contracts. So what they did is they applied analytical tools that were created by this guy named Bill James. So they were able to find players that were undervalued by other teams. And the whole idea was to find enough of these undervalued players so that you could put together enough runs. And if you could put together enough runs, then you would win. And they were very, very successful at that. They were good at it. It's a very Aquarian thing. Like Moneyball is very Aquarian. But then what happened is that everybody caught up. And it's like, oh, well, what happens if the LA Dodgers use analytics? Plus, they have hundreds of millions of dollars more in their war chest to spend on players. It rendered the A's model kind of more inert, right? So that was a really interesting, and I don't really like analytics, and it changed baseball. And it changed baseball to the point now where even some what I would call non-analytical things are starting to come into the game. What I mean by that is that changes are coming that don't have anything to do with what I just told you about. So for instance, in the minor leagues, they're going to have robot umpires. That is Aquarian. That is very Aquarian. We're going to get into some of that tonight, right? Because this is the precipice of the new age that we are sitting, we're like pipers at the gates of dawn with the changes that are about to come our way, both positively and negatively. So robot umpires, they're coming to the minor leagues. And I would assume that they'll do a test run in spring training with the major leagues. Maybe this season, if not this season, then next season, right? This is all Aquarian, right? This is part of where all this is going. This is where AI and robotics and all the, the transhumanist stuff comes into play. So we'll get into some of that. There's some very interesting characters that are a part of it. So the Aquarian people are fascinating. You may know them, and you may get along well with them. And even with my friend who I used to play fantasy football with, I always felt like there was this part of him that was kind of up in the clouds. And when I mean up in the clouds, I don't mean like he was like spacey. He was a really grounded individual, but up in the clouds, and that there was a part that I never really kind of knew in some ways. Right? There's always that 40,000 foot approach with Aquarius. Like when you're around a Scorpio and they open up, well, they will really let you know what's going on, right? Now, it may take them a while. By the way, whenever I have a client who's a Scorpio, they are the biggest fucking poker players as a client. They never say anything. Never. It's like sometimes I'm wondering if they're still on the call, right? Because that's how Scorpio rolls. And just got to go with it. Like, okay, well, I know that there's somebody still on the other end of this line. Hopefully, this is getting through. It's really funny how different signs interact with readings. Really, really. But Scorpio, they're the consummate poker players when it comes to read. I was thinking at some point I was gonna do like a show that some of the things, without divulging really anything, some of the things that I encounter as a professional astrologer. I'm not sure I'm going to do an entire show on it, but I think I'm going to tell you a couple things. I'm going to tell you a couple things that are really kind of mind blowing, and you would only know this if you did this for 5 days a week, 4 or 5 days a week for the last really 10 years now, actually 12 years, going on 13. Wow, long, big time. Anyway, one of the things that I've noticed, which is really strange, is the number of mothers of people that I've done readings for who have been institutionalized. To me, this was a real mind blower. And not every generation has this, but there seems to be a swath of people born in like the mid 50s to about maybe 65, like about a 10-year period there, whose mothers have been institutionalized. Really interesting. Really mind-blowing. It's like, wow, what was going on with women during that period of time? What were they going through? And it's kind of in this getting closer to, especially as we get into the mid 60s, the whole, wave towards feminism, and also in a lot of ways really static kind of roles inside the household as well. It's fascinating. It's one thing that I've never talked about, but it's strange how many mothers, and every now and then run across, some fathers have been institutionalized, but a lot of mothers. And again, not divulging any individual cases here, and you would probably nod your head in agreement. The amount of women, and every now and then a man, the amount of women who have been sexually molested is significant. It's like, wow, and you can see it a lot of times. You can see it in the chart. So that's not rocket science, but and it's like I don't want to get used to that and get jaded by that. But when it happens, it's like I'm less surprised. It's like, oh wow. I would have to say maybe 6 out of 10, between 5 and 6, 50 to 60%. It's a big number, really big number. And there's other things, but those are the two things that the last one is pretty clear. The one that really surprised me is the amount of mothers who've been institutionalized. And if not institutionalized, probably borderline. There was a period of like borderline moms from, I would say, the mid 50s up to the mid 60s. It's really, really interesting. And, during that time, Neptune is in Scorpio. And I wonder if that might have something to do just astrologically with that. All right, let's take a quick look at what's going on. Oh, my Niners are playing tonight. The Dallas Cowboys. Hated rivals. Hated rivals. The 49ers have a young quarterback by the name of Brock Purdy. The legend of Brock Purdy. Kid's what, 20, 23? He's 23 years old. He shows up when he comes into the train facility. He's got a JanSport backpack on. He looks like he's going to class. Yeah, he's a Capricorn. He's got a baby face. He's a very early Capricorn. And since he started for the 49ers, they have not lost a game. This guy's on a Capricorn trajectory, right? He's going straight up this mountain. Okay, so where does it stop? Does it stop tonight against the Cowboys? Right. And it's like, well, he got, as a Capricorn, be like, damn it, you played really well, had a great season. We got more to look forward to. Because the Capricorn's like, okay, next year I'm taking that next step, right? And the Cowboys are a formidable team. And a team that the 49ers really haven't played against at that level, right? And a heated rivalry. And if he could beat the Cowboys, or they beat the Cowboys, then he gets to the next level. And he's got to go to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. Road game. The Eagles looked dominant yesterday, right? So what would happen? I mean, he's getting close. He's getting close to the top of the mountain. The young goat. And if they lose to the Eagles, it's like, it's okay. It's okay. You're a Capricorn. Next year we take the mountain again, right? But then what happens if he beats the Eagles? Then he's got to go to the Super Bowl. If he gets to the Super Bowl and loses, it's like, it's still a Capricorn story, right? Yeah, we'll come back next year and we're one game away, right? I've got something to shoot for, which is very Capricornian. Or is he going to go straight to the top of the damn mountain in one season? It's a really interesting astrological question to ask. I promise I won't turn away from you tonight to check the score. All right, let's check out the stars. What's going on astrologically? Just a quick chart of the moment, and then what do you want? Well, your team won today. The Bengals won. Yeah, so your team is in. Yeah. Well, you get to see him play next week. All right, where are we here? Okay, here we go. Put it in the right location. Yes, the Bengals are going to play next week. Okay. But Jasper's restless tonight. I know you're restless. Okay, where are we? I'm just going to dial this up. Give me 1 second here. Normally, I just go to astro.com and go to the chart of the moment. But I'm just gonna make a chart right now. Okay, I think we got it. Let's do it. Let's do it. All right. Okay. All right, that's where we are. Sun at 2, Aquarius coming into a trine with Mars. And boy, it feels to me like that the energy at the beginning of the week here is really electric. Like boom, we're just, shot out of the gate. And I do think there's a lot of goodwill associated with Aquarius. Love thy neighbor, right? That's an Aquarian maxim. Love thy neighbor, although it could also be very Gemini because your neighbor lives next door to you. But it's an Aquarian maxim. And so, but we have the Sun trine Mars. I would say that there's some advantage with trying out some positivity. I remember I used to hang out with this guy in California. I met him through this Warriors message board, very interesting character. And he went by the name of Nigel Tufnell on the message board. And he had gone through landmark training. He did, all these human potential trips, and he loved Werner Erhard. And he had forged his will and identity into being just completely positive. And he would, we and I got on pretty well. I really liked him. And he would say, how come you're negative sometimes? and I would say, well, you ever see a medieval church? Yeah. Well, I'm one of the gargoyles that's looking down on things in the medieval church. There's room for the beautiful stained glass rose window, right? And then they got to have the gargoyle, looking down and having the water coming out of its mouth. So, I'm still part of the church. I'm still part of the creation. I'm just playing the role of a gargoyle every now and then. But his positivity was amazing. And the guy had a pretty interesting life, although he was a bit of a codger. He was a Scorpio, bit of a codger, but he had a very interesting life. So this is a week where you can jump in and flex your positivity muscles. And it's really interesting to think about that in the light of where we've been. Because that's such a new age kind of sentiment, right? The power of positive thinking, follow your bliss, think and grow rich. But we've been through and are still going through a very dark period. And we've had to see some very dark things. And if you're keeping score at home, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to ultimately come through the darkness and then hold and anchor something greater inside of yourself. Then, just, swallowing the black pill all the time. But not in a way that it was, being peddled by Oprah, who's an Aquarian, by the way. It takes, I think, more courage, to some extent effort, especially now, to take what I would call a positive tack. That doesn't mean that you have to, lay down or, sing "It's a Small World" after all, or, because Aquarius can be very rebellious, as we'll see. But what would be the most rebellious thing that you could do now during these times? Have a positive attitude. Be able to look at your life and your situation and other people's situations with a sense of, we can do this. We can do this. We've taken all these body blows, literally body blows, and we're looking around and we're seeing the results of people who have unfortunately made the wrong decision with misinformation or disinformation over the past 3 years. And if you have done that, and you're listening, there's still hope for you. There is still hope for you, especially if you are committed to being well. Okay, we're gonna hold a space. So knowing what we know, seeing what we've seen, having been through what we've been through, the most radical thing that you could do at this point in time is to live your life in all of its fullness with as much positive energy as possible. This week is good for that. We've got the sextile to Jupiter right here with the sun. Tomorrow on Monday, it lines up even closer. By Tuesday, right, they're on the hotline with each other. So the beginning of the week is extremely positive. And even with the new moon, right, squaring off against Uranus. Well, Uranus is direct now. Everything is direct. I mean, this is the news of the universe, right? Everything is direct. Mercury, Mars, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, Pluto, right? They're all marching forward. All marching forward. And even with the moon here in square with Uranus, it's starting to move away. It's like, you know what? Take a different tack. Take a different emotional tack. We're supposed to feel this way. Well, guess what? Going to feel a different way. And you can say, well, your feelings are your feelings. That's, to some extent, that's true. And you can begin to have different sets of feelings based on different thoughts, based on different actions. It can happen. Now, we do have Moon, Saturn coming closer into conjunction, which we'll see by tomorrow night, Tuesday, and then also coming in here in conjuncting Venus. Wow, that's very, very powerful, super powerful. Now, they're all separating from Uranus, so I don't really think that Uranus is going to be kind of much of a drag on this. This is going to be really interesting energy. So are the relationships you're in cement shoes, or the relationships you're in deep bonds that will help you get through the chaos of the days to come? That's the question. And maybe a little bit of both, but I feel like that's what this looks like, right? Cement shoes or deep, unshakable bonds. Now, on a collective level, as we're dealing with Aquarian energy, you know, how much are people going to be open to the, you know, the cheap production fairy tale of the World Economic Forum? I watched that thing. We could talk a little bit about this now. And when we were looking at it last week, and how Mercury was positioned, and still is, way behind the sun and Pluto, it's like, well, there are plans going on. Like they're you know, scheming things out, you know, pretty far from prying eyes. And I still think that that's kind of the case, right? Like, just like anything in life, you'll see the thing that is there for you to see, but then there's the occulted view of the thing that you think you're seeing, like what's really going on 2, 3, 4 levels deeper than the show, right? Or the circus. And I think some of that was going on with Davos. It's the things that we didn't see. It's the meetings that aren't for public purview. But what we did see was, it was really interesting because we had that Sun-Pluto conjunction. And it's like, oh my God, you're trotting these fossils out to try to get people to wrap their arms around, you know, this kind of technocratic hellscape that's powered by QR codes and digital passports and phantom plagues, and not just phantom plagues, but the climate that's completely and utterly out of control. It's like, that was a terrible show. That was a really, you know, it's kind of like having a telethon for something. That's what they should do. They should have a telethon. Remember, like the Jerry Lewis telethon? They should have one for the planet, right? Just have the planetathon. And then once you get whatever you get from people, then that's it. No more. Here's your extortion money. Go away. No, but it was like a bad telephone. You had John Kerry out there looking like a cadaver. He looked horrible. I mean, the guy's almost 80. There's some 80-year-old people look pretty sharp. Not John Kerry. Then you had Tony Blair, who seems like he's trying to line himself up to be in position to be the next Klaus Schwab. But who's listening to these people? Who is listening to these people? Right? And then you have Al Gore just, huffing and puffing and sweating, and like they're so irrelevant. And when you watch them and listen to them, do you think that there's some 23-year-old Gen Zer at home that's listening to those guys thinking, oh yeah, wow, you guys have it. I'm ready to listen to your message and jump all in. No, you know what you're listening to? They're listening to Andrew Tate. That's who they're listening to. Or maybe they're listening to Greta Thunberg. They're not listening to these guys. And so when I saw that Sun-Pluto conjunction, what really came to me is that they're dead. Really, they're dead. Like they're dead, they're hollow inside, their message has no meaning. It's all predicated on some kind of veiled threats about what they need to do in order for the greater good. But when you really sit back and listen to them, there's nothing there. Nothing there. So will they continue to try to build this not so perfect beast? Sure. Until somebody comes along and offers up a better deal, or they just start being exposed for who they are, right? That, to me, that was the big takeaway. But again, that's the level at which we can see. There are 2 or 3 other levels beneath that. That's Mercury behind Pluto, where there's obviously more going on. But I really like the energy of the week ahead. I think it's great. As Mercury advances, it moves more into trine with Uranus. Things speed up, communication speed up, new and novel ways of sharing information come on board. This is an interesting week, and we're in the new moon phase. So one of the things I wanted to mention, I didn't get a chance to do it, but I'm going to mention it here tonight, is when you come here next week and we do the show next week, I'm going to have, and I'm even have it before then, but I'm going to have the opportunity for you guys to sign up for a class that I'm going to do. And it's going to be a very basic nuts and bolts class on astrology. It's not going to be something like really advanced, or we're going to take 5 hours. It's going to be 2 classes, right? One day, one the next day, 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours. And by the time you're done with those 5 hours, I guarantee you'll have the basics of astrology. You'll have it, right? I will be able to communicate and teach to you the basics of astrology. 5 hours, and it will not be expensive. I think I'll charge $50. And it's like $10 an hour, right? So if you're new to the game, and I know a lot of you have been watching the show, you might be not so new, but if you are, just stay tuned. I'll have the link, and we'll do it here fairly soon. It'll be 2.5 hours on a Saturday, Sunday, and then the attendees will get a discount on my astrology course, which you'll probably want. So I just wanted to announce that on the new moon. Wanted to get it in under that new moon energy. Okay, let's get into the Aquarian story and some of the historical figures that are associated with the sign of Aquarius. And I was thinking about this whole idea, the constellation of Aquarius is behind me. And you can see here the bucket, right? This is where the contents are being poured out of the bucket. And I thought about things like Aquarius and resets, and how when we have a heavy duty Aquarian influence time, that we have a time that is, I would say, connected to resets. And, collectively, we have the reset of the flood, or the great flood, which is a very Aquarian thing. It's like, down from the heavens, it pours and the oceans rise, and Noah and Utnapishtim set sail on their, that's an Aquarian story. That's an Aquarian tale, right? And then they see the rainbow, which is in a very Aquarian image. And then land ahoy, right? And it's the new time. It's the new time and the new tale. So Aquarius is related to resets. And we don't have to go that far back to find how Aquarius, as it relates to Uranus, has played a role with a reset. And that goes to the 1960s, where there was a Uranus-Pluto conjunction. And of course, during that time, we have the famous song by the Fifth Dimension, or actually they sang it. I'm not sure they wrote it. But the famous song sung by the Fifth Dimension, Age of Aquarius. So that all happens during the Uranus and Pluto conjunction in Virgo. So the 60s are a reset. They are a total reset, for better or worse, right? The 60s are a reset. The values are reset. The hierarchy, when we get into the mid 60s, all of it has its genesis in the 50s, but really in the 60s, it's all about the youth and youth culture. So we have this inversion that takes place during the 60s, when at a certain point, it was, respect your elders. Respect your elders. Children are seen, not heard. And then in the 60s, it all gets inverted, and there's no respect for elders. I mean, there is, right? But it really starts to fly out the window. And in fact, we can begin to see, even in the mid to late 60s, a changing image around fathers that are portrayed in media and TV shows. And the fathers that start to show up in the mid 60s and late 60s are very different than the fathers that were around in the late 50s and early 60s, whether it's Ozzie Nelson or Ward Cleaver, right? There were very different versions of fathers. They were, fairly respected. Every now and then you have a goofball dad. But as we move forward into the 60s, that changes. So the role of the father even shifts. It's like, it's daddy again, right? Oh, daddy's being a goofball again, and who winds up looking smart? It's the mothers in the show, in most cases, right? And then we have, really, at the end of the 60s and beginning of the 70s, the ultimate version of that, who's Archie Bunker, and he's a fool. Archie Bunker's a fool, right? He's the most caricature of the caricatured version of an American father, a conservative American father. So we see the inversion, or the reset, and it's the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, and we're changing convention, right, during the 60s. And that's just one version of it. We go into the 90s, we have a Uranus-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn. That's another bit of a reset as well during the 90s. And it's a very interesting one, and one that goes back to the 60s. Because if you look at what happened in the 60s, you had the theoretical rebel underclass, whose goal was to take over, right? Their goal was to take over, whether it was Jerry Rubin or Abby Hoffman or Bill Ayers or Bernadine Dorn or Hillary Clinton, who you'll see later here in the show. Hillary Clinton, like their goal was to overturn the establishment, That was their goal. They wanted to burn it all down. You go into the 90s, you have the Neptune-Uranus conjunction. Who do you have as first lady of the White House? You have Hillary Clinton. So we have another reset starting to take place. But the reset that's happening is taking place within the government itself, right? And there's a character, historical character, who is an Aquarian we're going to talk about tonight, who plays a very important role in Hillary Clinton's life. So even then, as the Clintons move into the White House, we're seeing a reset of the global economy as they dole out privilege to China. And not just privilege, making them most favored nation trading status available to them, but even state secrets, all going to China. That's a reset. That's globalism. Now we see American companies beginning to populate places like China because it is cheaper to make products there. And who do the Clintons have a geographical relationship with? It is the Walton family from Arkansas. And the Walton family is the family that's going to really benefit the most from this new and revolutionary and reset relationship with China. So we see Uranus. Now, remember, in Virgo, it's rising up against the theoretical royalty or the king or the queen or the establishment, because Virgo is the plebes. And we had Pluto and Uranus conjunction in Virgo. So it's the plebes that are rising. This is what's happening, right? The plebes are rising. And I've talked about this many times, their goal is to kill the king. And the king winds up being Richard Nixon. They kill the king. And they're successful. They're successful. Now, Nixon was about to be impeached. He resigned. But that's the plebes, right? That's kind of a microcosm of the French Revolution in a lot of ways. So that by the time we get into the 90s, the so-called plebes are now, guess what, the ruling class, and set the tone for the next iteration of the reset, right? This is really interesting in the role Uranus plays or the role Aquarius plays when it comes to these resets. So here we are, Pluto coming into Aquarius, and the thundercloud of the reset looming, before our very eyes. And I've talked about the period in 1849, 1850, which a lot of people look at as being this strange, weird place where all these bizarre occurrences happened, like huge migration, just really strange stuff, right? And for a lot of people that are on the Tartarian train, that period of time, like 1849, the gold rush to San Francisco, is one of those markers. And if you look at what's happening astrologically, you can see like Pluto and Uranus changing almost simultaneously from Aries to Taurus. And so we have this, again, this new kind of reset energy taking place in the mid 1800s. And by the time we get to the late 1800s, early 1900s, there's the second industrial revolution. So Uranus and Aquarius play a role in the idea of these resets. And you can see that the symbolic version is coming out of the bucket, right? It is the new wave that is crashing upon the shore of our consciousness, right? Even in in movies, they had new wave cinema, mostly dominated by French directors like Godard and René. So even that, like this whole idea of this new wave, I think the term new wave was coined by Herb Caen. Don't hold me to that, but I think he coined that term. And in music, after punk rock was kind of rejected as a label, and they needed something that was more label friendly, they chose the term new wave, right? So again, it's a very Aquarian It's a new tide. It's a changing of the guards. There's new bands. There's new hairstyles. There's new instruments. This is what we get with the language of Aquarius and that bucket coming over and, turning over the contents, right? And the contents wipe away the thing that was there before, but also bring something new with it. So we're kind of in that place now. We're in that zone where we're looking at the old world. The old world is going away, but the new world in the how do I say this? The application of the elements for the new world is not going as planned, which I think we should recognize and take note of, because that's going to be a theme here over the next 20 years. And you never know with Aquarius, or you just never know. And just when we think like, oh yeah, the scoundrels have been routed, and Klaus Schwab is now reportedly, sick somewhere, and all of a sudden he's gone, right? It's like, see, yeah, great. There's no more Schwab, and all of a sudden something else comes up. Wow, where did this come from, right? So the one thing about Aquarius that we, I think, need to take into account is to not rest on laurels. And the one thing that Aquarius is really good at is being detached and dispassionate. Now, every now and then you can crack open a nice, cold, sparkling water and celebrate the departure of Jacinda Ardern. But then you got to move on, right? It's like, move on. Like, yeah, good, she's gone. Ding dong, the witch is dead. And that may or may not be a sign of things to come. Don't get attached to it. Do not get attached to it. Because that's the thing with Aquarius. As soon as you get attached to it, the form breaks up again. Like, oh. So through this time, we'll be able to really develop some very good discernment skills and learn how to kind of ride a current. You ever go to a casino and gamble and start to get hot? Did it ever happen to you? It happened to me on a couple of occasions. And I noticed that when I just stayed at a certain state and didn't get attached to it, it kept going. The more they got attached to it, the more it was like, oh yeah, look what I got, right? Then it started to change a little bit. And not that my gambling experience should be the augur of how you deal with reality, trust me, but there is something to it, right? There's something to it. When you don't necessarily notice that things are kind of moving in one direction, you're kind of semi-conscious, you're aware of it, but your awareness is more up here than it is down here. The opportunity and chance to continue to move in that direction is a lot greater. And I think that's something that Aquarius will teach us as well, is to learn how to be kind of in this spectrum or in this wave without getting too bogged down by self-consciously identifying with where we are. I think that's going to be our key to dealing with the so-called gravity of our situations. So why don't we get into some Aquarian characters? Because this is really interesting group of people. Super, super interesting. And some of them, I have to say, I don't like very much. And others I think are like, wow, good on you. But there's so many patterns involved. I'm not going to get into individual charts. So this is just kind of a wide spectrum sort of look at the characteristics in the sign. Okay. So I remember, and I've been looking at this stuff for a long time. It's not like I just discovered these things. But I remember when I really started to go down the Aquarian rabbit hole, and I did a show on Gaia TV called The Dark Aquarian Age. And again, want to toot my own horn, but I was talking about the dark Aquarian age before a lot of other people were talking about it. And it's only because the astrology world has tended to be on more of the love and light side of things. And I wasn't looking at it from that perspective. And so when I started to search for correspondences, some really interesting, unusual, and that's what I'm looking for. Disruptive people showed up. Okay, so why don't we start with this first group, which I think is really interesting. So I started to look at like the color revolutions, and you see a lot of these color revolutions taking place back in the 2000s, the 2010s. So it starts just before the 2010s, and then it really moves into the 2010s. So we have all these color revolutions. Well, where did the color revolutions come from? Who is the architect of the color revolutions? Well, I will show you. And in fact, I'll show you all these characters, and they're all kind of connected in one way or another. All right. And I did them all at once because I just wanted to kind of bring them up. So the father of the color revolution is Gene Sharp. And Gene Sharp was a professor who taught here in the US. And he wrote a number of books about peaceful protest and passive resistance. You can see in the background, he has Gandhi back here, right? So Gandhi is an inspiration to Sharp. And Sharp is the guy who creates this whole idea of the color revolution. And the color revolution is something that is designed for the youth. It's like revolution should be fun. And he has 2 books that are considered to be the playbook for anybody who has any interest in this idea of not just color revolutions, but like equity and equity, equality. We'll do a slash there. Liberation, and to a large extent, I would say the redistribution of resources and taking them out of the hands of people that would have the ability to create less equity and less equality. So his books, so I can just, because I don't want to just go through here. I'll just do a quick wiki here with Gene Sharp. He's a very pivotal figure. He's a revolutionary, and he teaches revolutionaries, and he's an Aquarian. Theory of nonviolent resistance. Gene Sharp described the sources of his ideas as in-depth studies of Mohandas K. Gandhi, A.J. Musk, Henry David Thoreau to a minor degree, and other sources, footnoted in his 1973 book, The Politics of Nonviolent Action. So that's one of the big playbooks for the revolutionary mindset of our time. Okay. Sharp identifies this hidden structure as providing a window of opportunity. In Sharp's view, all effective power structures have systems by which they encourage or extract obedience from their subjects. States have particularly complex systems for keeping subjects obedient. These systems include specific institutions, police, courts, regulatory bodies, etc., but may also involve cultural dimensions that inspire obedience by implying that the power is monolithic. The god cult of the Egyptian pharaohs, the dignity of the office of the president, more ethical norms and taboos, etc. So that extends into what? Teachers and parents as well. Those are part of the institutions. Through these systems, subjects are presented with a system of sanctions, imprisonment, fines, ostracism, and rewards, titles, wealth, fame, which influence the extent of their obedience. Sharp identifies this hidden structure as providing a window of opportunity for a population to cause significant change in a state. Sharp cites the insight of Etienne Boetie that if the subjects of a particular state recognize that they are the source of the state's power, they can refuse their obedience and their leaders will be left without power. Sharp published Waging Nonviolent Struggle, 20th Century Practice, 21st Century Potential in 2005. It builds on his earlier written works and documents case studies where nonviolent action has been applied, presents the lessons learned from those applications, and contains information to plan a nonviolent struggle to make it more effective. How to Start a Revolution, a feature documentary by the Scottish director Ruard Arrow about the global influence of James Sharp's work, was released in September 2001. So you can see, so Sharp has been called both the Machiavelli of nonviolence and the Clausewitz of nonviolent warfare. It is claimed by some that Sharp's scholarship has influenced resistance organizations around the world. His work remains the ideological underpinning of the work for the Serbian-based nonviolent conflict training group, the Center for Applied Nonviolent Action and Strategies. We're going to look at that in a moment here, which helped train key activists in the protest movement that toppled President Mubarak of Egypt and many other earlier youth movements in Eastern Europe, the color revolutions. Okay, so Gene Sharp is one of the most important people of the 20th and the 21st century. And it's because he creates the model for how to stage a revolution. And what is Gene Sharp? He is an Aquarian, right? So we can see, right? This guy is the godfather of revolutionary tactics. He's Aquarian. And this is just how the sign gets played out. And he's a very early Aquarian at that. Now here we have, if you don't recognize the man next to him, that is Saul Alinsky. And Saul Alinsky wrote the book Rules for Radicals, and he dedicated that book to Lucifer, who was the first radical, the first revolutionary. A backward glance. I dedicate this book to Lucifer, giving him a backward glance. This is what he talks about. And Saul Alinsky was a very smart guy, and he maps out how to use the system against itself. Now, I said we would talk about Hillary Clinton, and this is the connection. Hillary Clinton studied at the elbow of Saul Alinsky. So when she takes office, along with her husband, in was that 1999, 2000, right? 2000, 2000, 2002, 2002. So it was 2000 and 96 and so 1992, 92, 96. Okay, so 1992, when she takes office with Bill in 92, what you have is you have one of Saul Alinsky's disciples, star pupil, studied with him right there in the White House. See what started in the 60s manifests in that Neptune-Uranus conjunction in Capricorn, which is the radical disillusionment, not disillusionment, the radical dissolution of Capricornian structures, including the presidency. And Alinsky is very, very good at creating this playbook. And we're still in the Alinsky playbook right now. Now, what was interesting about COVID, because I think COVID was, let's just say part of it was a strategy, okay? In Rules for Radicals, they talk about you can't run, they call them actions. You can't run with an action too long. Because if you run with an action too long, people are going to lose interest. They're going to get burned out. and it can be deleterious or disadvantageous for what you're trying to accomplish. So Alinsky knew all about how to freeze something. He knew about, going after people's character, using their own morality against them. He's an Aquarian, right? So he's another part of the architecture. These two guys wind up creating the manifestos, the maps, and the blueprints for the application of radical tools and overthrow revolution in the 20th and 21st century. They're both Aquarians. Now, over here, this is a guy you probably are less familiar with, and this is Sergei Popovic, and he is Hillary Clinton to Gene Sharp, right? As Hillary Clinton was Saul Alinsky's kind of student at the elbow, Sergei Popovic has a similar relationship to Gene Sharp. So Popovic creates Aqua, and it's his group that starts to figure out how to do these color revolutions in Europe and in North Africa with Egypt, right? So he's important. He's important because while Gene Sharp is an academic and he's able to write these things and create these things, Sergei Popovic is the guy that puts them into action. So he is one of the boots on the ground architects of the color revolutions of the 2010s. And lo and behold, he's an Aquarian, right? So I wanted to give you 3 examples of how Aquarius is very radical, is very revolutionary. And, could these people have done something different with their Aquarian energy? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe. Could they have gone to work for Procter & Gamble and done marketing? I don't think so. So they're living in a lot of ways. I mean, would you say that Saul Alinsky was authentic? I would. I don't really like the guy. I think what he's brought to the table ultimately has brought us a lot of chaos and disorder in a way that, I'm not opposed to chaos and disorder. I think interesting things can happen in chaos. But look around. Look at the chaos that we're dealing with now. A lot of it can be laid at the feet of Saul Alinsky. So maybe these are the devils of our time, right? And that as devils they play a role. There's that line from Jacob's Ladder when Tim Robbins is sitting down with Danny Aiello, who's his chiropractor, Louis. And Louis says, did you ever think that the devils were actually angels in disguise and here to liberate you from your suffering? Now, that message in that movie is an encoded message for Tim Robbins' character. I don't want to give away the movie, but what do we learn from these people? Or what do we learn from the radical and revolutionary Aquarian spirit? What can we take away from it that applies to our lives? Because, let's face it, there are oppressed people in the world. Not everybody in this, experience and this reality has a quote unquote equal chance. That doesn't mean that they cannot have a place in the world. Because I have seen people with very little, without connections, do pretty extraordinary things with their lives. I've seen other people with great privilege piss it all away, ruin their family name, and, wind up either, kind of human wreckage or even dead, right? So there's a lot of leeway in those stories. But, these guys play a role in their own way. And even if it's theoretically a negative role, it wakes us up. When you see something going on that really looks like it's astroturfed and simulated, it's like, oh yeah, this is like, say, stage 3 or 4 in one of Alinsky's, rules for radicals, one of the pieces of the playbook. So they wake us up to the manipulation of reality, whether it's the manipulation of reality that is coming from this end, or the manipulation of reality that's coming from the end that they're trying to break up and show the inequity of the system, right? So are they without a place in our lives? Are they there to show us something and teach us something? I'd say yes. And what we learn from them and how we discern and how we plan our own lives is going to be part of this journey with Pluto and Aquarius. So the next tier down are the 3, I'd say, heavyweights of science in a lot of ways in our time. So the first is Darwin, and he's born on the 12th of February in 1809. And of course, we don't have to spend a lot of time detailing Darwin and his impact on quote unquote modern science and his evolutionary theory, which, by the way, is completely flawed. But it's that theory which moves everybody away from creation theory, right? So with creation theory, it's really coming out of the Piscean holism, and that holism connected to a more traditional biblical orthodoxy, the 7 days of creation, right? And now here comes Darwin with his black hat and his notes and observations from the Galapagos, and turns the world upside down. And the next thing you know, they're teaching evolutionary theory in public schools. And that is very Aquarian in a lot of ways. It's a system buster. He's breaking with tradition. He's breaking with religion, right? This is the big thing with Darwin. So the atheists and the dark alchemists are, they're dancing a jig, because now there's this character who's put together this theory in an incomplete one, and where it's incomplete, they'll be happy to fill in and applying it. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't some merit to some of Darwin's work. The whole idea of social Darwinism, I think, is interesting. It probably applies more to the social world. This whole idea of survival of the fittest. You'll see that in the natural world too. But it's the evolutionary piece of, coming out of the sea and, going from a reptile to an ape to a man. That part is dubious, right? But that's the thing that replaces the thing that was prior to that. So Darwin is a huge figure here. And as an Aquarian, he upsets the previous order. That's exactly what he does. He upsets the previous order, for better or worse, right? We're living in a post-Darwinian world, which is about to be radically changed by this guy. But before we get to him, we got to stop here. That's Edison. It's all interesting too, right? 12, 11, and then 12. So Edison's a gatekeeper. I think that's his role. He's an Aquarian again. So, theoretically, like the father of modern electricity and all these other inventions, whether or not he actually created them himself, that's always up for debate. We all know that he employed Tesla And who knows where Tesla got his ideas and his work from. But Edison, again, is this guy that we associate with something that's very Aquarian. Lighten them up. Benjamin Franklin's lightning, but when you turn on a light, right, it's like summoning lightning at your fingertip, which is a very Aquarian thing. And again, for better or worse with Edison. Of the three, he's probably, I would say he's the most benign. He doesn't strike me as a very kind man. He's buddies with Henry Ford too. That's a whole other story. But over here, sharing the same birth date as Charles Darwin is Ray Kurzweil, who is the father of what we call the singularity. So it's interesting because, again, Darwin is talking about this evolutionary progression in humanity, right, going from muck to, upright hominid with all these other steps in between. And Kurzweil is going to take it to the next step. Kurzweil is the father of synthetic sentience, artificial intelligence, and of course the singularity. The singularity being, this is Ray Kurzweil's prediction, is that he believes that at some point artificial intelligence and the ability of artificial intelligence to surpass humanity's intelligence will occur. And in his mind, he believes that that's when artificial intelligence will become sentient. That there's this kind of 100th monkey piece that goes along with all this. And Kurzweil has been steadily working for Google for a number of years now. They brought him in to advance things like robotics, and they bought a bunch of robotics firms when Ray Kurzweil came into the company. But then they've since sold a lot of them, and what they've done is they've taken people from those companies, right, and they brought them in-house to Google, and they took certain things from those companies and then have continued to work on them. So Kurzweil could be considered the modern Darwin in a lot of ways. And I think it's really interesting that they're both born on the same day, and they both have this weird relationship with these, what I would call inorganic evolutionary principles of humanity. And you would say, well, what's inorganic about Darwin? Well, when you get into Darwin, they've never been able to find it, what they call the intermediary species. Never. The thing they call the missing link, they never find it. They'll never find it. You'll always see something in a newspaper where it'll be like, strange bird or strange reptile found in such and such. And, this could lead to clues to, how humanity went from, this state to another. You'll see these from time to time. They come up, but they never are, right? So these are the guys here. These are radical social scientists. And these are, in many ways, radical scientists whose theories were then later applied by science to create a very different social science in the world that we're living in. Let me give you 3 presidents that typify the spirit of Aquarius. Now, when you see these guys, you'll go, wow, these guys are heavyweights. And why are they heavyweights? Because they changed governance in this country, for better or worse. So you have Lincoln, who, by the way, is born on, looks like Lincoln is born on the same day as Charles Darwin. I never made that connection before. Lincoln and Darwin are born on the same day. That's a trip. 2/12/09. That's 1809. And Lincoln's radical, right? He's radical. And a lot of people will see him as being a great liberator. Other people will see him as being the great instigator and only being concerned about quote unquote emancipation because of what the South had to offer in terms of money, revenue, taxation, right? That Lincoln really was operating to a large extent under a virtue signal of the time. He, in some circles, Lincoln is not very well liked. And there are people who have done extensive amounts of work on Lincoln and his treachery. Right. So, but for better or worse, right, he shapes the direction of the country for better or worse. And being an Aquarian, he splits the country in two. You know, it's the Emancipation Proclamation that literally splits the country in two, which is what Aquarius does, right? It's the lightning bolt, it's the thundercrack. And over here on the other side, you've got Roosevelt, another Aquarian. And what does he do? Again, he reshapes the country. The New Deal, work projects, administration. And Roosevelt brings a new level of social programs into the country that had not existed before. And during his day, Roosevelt was not as popular as a lot of people think. Like, there were a number of newspapers, I've talked about this before, that would do op-eds on Roosevelt. And back then, there were hundreds of different newspapers. They weren't all like under the rubric of like Gannett Press, or, you know, there were small presses, small newspapers, and they were very critical of Roosevelt. A lot of America did not want to get into World War II. They wanted to be more isolationist. And they were very critical of what he does by seizing production in a lot of ways. And corporations, as we know it, really come on board with Roosevelt because they're created so that they can take advantage of tax breaks and quote unquote rebuild America and put people back to work. So yeah, we have a lot of infrastructure during the time of Roosevelt. And yeah, post Lincoln, now we have a theoretical united instead of a divided republic, but there's always the price to pay, the cost to pay when you deal with both of these characters. And I'm not here to proclaim that the South was better than the North or anything like that, right? But it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. And to this day, there are people and factions in the South that have not really gotten over what has happened. And it has nothing to do with slavery. It has to do with the intervention of the federal government into their own lives, right? And here we have, again, Roosevelt making huge inroads into public life by creating the beginning of this massive structure that we know of as the federal government. Again, Aquarian. And then down here we have Reagan, who is another Aquarian, right? And he's radical in his own way. He's radical as he theoretically shifts everything from the left and from the, you know, the towering monolithic government that was started by Roosevelt and got even more flatulent and obese during the time of Johnson, right? Reagan decides that he's going to cut social programs, much to the consternation of a lot of other people, right? He's going to trim the fat. He's going to rewrite the tax code, and he's going to apply this trickle-down theory where if rich people get richer, it's better for everybody. So he is, in many ways, the opposite of Roosevelt, but just as radical. Just as radical. And while Reagan's domestic policy kind of reshaped the distribution of wealth. It's really his foreign policy that reshapes the entire world. Because it's under Reagan where we see the so-called fall of the Soviet Union, right? So these guys are Aquarians, and they're ideological too. That's the other thing about Roosevelt and Lincoln and Reagan. They're ideological, and their ideologies permeate their presidencies. And there are other presidents who have made a pretty significant impact, but I don't think there are three like these guys whose impact is as deeply felt and divisive too. Not everybody liked Lincoln, not everybody liked Roosevelt, and not everybody liked Reagan. But as Aquarians, they don't seem to care very much. That's the other thing about Aquarius. Leo presidents love to be loved. And no matter, how cool and detached and theoretically suave Barack Obama was, deep down inside, he wanted to be loved. Trust me. As a Leo, he wanted to be loved. Bill Clinton wanted to be loved. And even Donald Trump, with his Leo ascendant, wants to be loved. Trump's weird, right? Because he's got that Leo thing, and he's got the Sun Uranus conjunction in Gemini, which does make him a little Aquarian too. All right. So those are three presidents I pulled out of the Aquarian bricolage, and then 6 scientists and social scientists that I think are very Aquarian in their approach and how they've impacted our lives. So now we're just going to go through this list of people, and I'm going to just do a little bit of commentary on each of them because this is a pretty good list. And you'll be able to see a bit of a theme here. So Babe Ruth was an Aquarian. Jeb Bush, Aquarius wants their designation back from you. Just saying. Mozart, right? Mozart is a total Aquarian. Mozart is punk rock. Mozart is the Johnny Rotten of his day in a lot of ways. He's brilliant. He does things that nobody else can do. He's petulant. He's also a Mason. But Mozart is a total Aquarian. He's breaking new ground in composition. He's a prodigy. Total Aquarian. We got Michael Jordan, Air Jordan, Aquarius, of course. This is weird. This is like the most 100 most famous Aquarius in history. How does, pardon my language here, fucking triple extentation hit the number 13 slot? Like, he's one slot ahead of Frederick Douglass. You got to be kidding me. I mean, this dude, he's not even around anymore. And he's one slot ahead of Frederick Douglass, 5 slots ahead of Reagan. Whoever put this list together is an Aquarian. There's Darwin at 16, Ronaldo. So there's interesting athletes, right? We have Jordan, at the same time Gretzky. Those two guys were kind of synonymous during the day. Jordan and Gretzky, both Aquarians. Travolta's an Aquarian. Let's see, who else do we have here? Yeltsin. So we have rebel scientists too. Galileo, man. Galileo was nearly burned at the freaking stake, right? He's a rebel. He's an Aquarian. Yoko Ono is an Aquarian. By the way, was listening to Double Fantasy a little bit. I am going to be the contrarian here, and I'm going to say that the Yoko Ono songs on Double Fantasy are better than the John Lennon songs. They're more interesting. I think the production on them is equal to, or if not better than, the Lennon tracks. And she's a total Aquarian. She's kooky, right? Eccentric. Bob Marley, Aquarius. Jack Nicklaus, Aquarius. Bill Bixby, Aquarius. Noriega. His rebelliousness got him into trouble, didn't he? Didn't it? Sure did. Paul Newman. Isn't that an Aquarian name? He's a new man. That's not, of course, it's not his real name. But if you're an Aquarian, why not have the name New Man? Right? That fits your sign, doesn't it? Rosa Parks. Of course, she's an Aquarian. She's also a commie. But she's an Aquarian. She was trained at the, was it the Outlander School in Tennessee, along with Martin Luther King. Sherman, bad Aquarian, burning Atlanta in the South down. Tom Selleck, Aquarius. Jackie Robinson. Now there's some, now it's really interesting because Michael Jordan was not political. Everybody got on his case. Oh, you got a platform. How come you're not more political? Well, Jackie Robinson was an Aquarian, and right, that guy, he was political without being political. Jackie Robinson is a total Aquarian. He's the first Black player in Major League Baseball, right? Breaks the color line. Rosa Parks breaks the bus line. These are very Aquarian things. No matter what you think of Rosa Parks, right? She is associated with sitting in the front of the bus. Jackie Robinson rides the bus in Major League Baseball. Rick James, bitch, is an Aquarian. Of course, we have Rasputin. A lot of these people are outliers too. So in the newsletter, I make a connection with Rosa Parks, who is a rebel with a cause, and James Dean, who is a rebel without a cause. Both Aquarians. Kim Jong-il, he's an Aquarian. Lindbergh, literally an Aquarian, revolutionary, first man to fly. Jim Brown is interesting. Jim Brown starts off as more of what I would call a kind of radical Black activist when he leaves football. And by the time, Jim is still around, but if you go back into part of the 90s and the 2000s, Jim Brown, finds God, starts a ministry, and really takes this interesting turn. Like, he really has an Aquarian turn in his life. And he starts off one way, and then he does this pivot and has a completely different kind of trajectory, which I respect the hell out of. Farrah Fawcett, Aquarius. Brendan Behan, who I believe is an Irish revolutionary. Imagine that, an Aquarian. Garth Brooks is interesting because remember he did that weird album where he was like Chris something, I forget, and he does this rock album, becomes this completely different person. Like, that's an Aquarian right there. Mick Jagger's kid, Harry Styles knows that Mick Jagger's kid. Alice Cooper, total Aquarian. Schubert, Mozart, Aquarians. So we got some great composers here. Dickens, Aquarius. Hank Aaron, who passed away, Aquarian, right? Lisa Marie, who passed away, Aquarian. There's Susan B. Anthony, Aquarian. Bill Russell, see that basketball? Right? That basketball became a giant boulder. Bill Russell lived most of his life with a huge chip on his shoulder. He was, unlike Jim Brown, who pivoted. Bill Russell never pivoted. He always felt disrespected and just a weird guy, very weird guy. And the people in the NBA are all wearing his number now. He just passed away too. Django Reinhardt, the guy with the weird hand, Aquarian. There he is, Christian Bale, the aforementioned. Elijah Wood looks like an Aquarian. He acts like an Aquarian too, doesn't he? He's a quirky motherfucker. Totally quirky motherfucker. Who else do we have? Gene Hackman, Jennifer Aniston. So you got Susan B. Anthony and Jennifer Aniston. Let's see who else. Robbie Williams. We looked at his chart a couple of years ago. He had kind of an interesting chart. Mariska Hargitay, Jay Mansfield's daughter. Who else do we have? Neil Diamond. So James Joyce is another rebel, right? He's a literary rebel. His novels get banned because they're considered to be pornographic. He's an Aquarian. Let's see. I don't know much to say about Ed Sheeran. Megan Thee Stallion, an Aquarian. John McEnroe, the enfant terrible of tennis. Of course, he's an Aquarian. Axl Rose is very Aquarian. In fact, he gets about as close to being born on the Antichrist birthday as anybody. Bill Veeck, or Veeck, who was a general manager in Major League Baseball, he was a guy that had all these weird promotions. And he kind of set the tone for being a general manager in Major League Baseball. And he was a manager of a team called the St. Louis Browns, who were terrible. They lost all the time. And one time he hired a midget named Eddie Goodell to play for him for one game. And because he was so small, pitchers walked him all 4 times. Right. That was Bill Veeck. He thought outside the box. Let's put it that way. Very Aquarian, though. Am I right? Now we have Oprah, who is an Aquarian. And we also have Ellen DeGeneres, who succeeded Oprah, is an Aquarian, right? They're both Aquarians, both talk show queens. Elizabeth Holmes, it's really funny. Elizabeth Holmes was using PCR for her company. What was it called? Was it Thanos? I think it was called Thanos. And all this Silicon Valley money got pumped into her company. It was all about early detection for cancer and stuff like that. And she wound up eventually, I think, going to jail. Right? But they used the PCR anyway for what happened next. Really weird. It's almost like she's kind of the scapegoat for PCR. Let's take her, let's crucify her, get her out of the way, and let's use this technology. Who else do we have? Burt Reynolds, an Aquarian. Let's see, who else do we have here? So you have Neymar and you had Ronaldo, both big soccer players, both Aquarians. Of course, Eddie Van Halen. William Shockley is the father of eugenics and computer and science. He was one of the guys who helped create the transistor. And of course, he's an Aquarian. And apparently, he was also connected to the Georgia Guidestones. Francis Bacon, author of New Atlantis, Aquarian. Billy Joe Armstrong, Green Day, Aquarian. Jules Verne, futurist, Aquarian. Paul Scofield, A Man for All Seasons, Aquarian. Phil Collins, who's in really bad shape. And Peter Gabriel in the same band. There's only room for one Aquarian there. Genesis. Jackson Pollock, of course, he's an Aquarian. Breaking new ground in painting. Michael Hutchins. Oh, look at that. There he is, number 168. Of course, he's an Aquarian. We've looked at his chart before. Vladimir Zelensky. I'd like to thank you, the people of the United States, for giving me hundreds of billions of dollars to keep our strong in our fight against the Russian people and the Russian government. And even though you have been so generous, we need more. There he is, a little twerp. Right there. Of course, he's an Aquarian. Betty Friedan, the godmother of feminism. Of course, she's an Aquarian. The radicals are always Aquarians. I'm sorry, I'm not here. Oh, look, Malcolm McLaren. How about that? Father of the Sex Pistols, along with Johnny Rotten, the Aquarian 1-2 punch. Alice Walker, who wrote The Color Purple that Oprah Winfrey starred in. Both Aquarians. How about that? I love these syncs with astrology. Clint Black, I think, is born like a day or two after Axl Rose. We've looked at Paris Hilton's chart, Aquarius. Really interesting group of people. Am I right? And patterns. Oh, God. Dick Cheney. Is Woodard and Bernstein, are they both Aquarians? They are, aren't they? Wow. Bob Woodard and Carl Bernstein are both Aquarians. Ushering in the downfall of Nixon, the Capricorn, right? The next sign over destroys the sign previous to it. Let's see, who else? We got John Williams, a composer, Aquarius. Steve Nash, the Aquarius. Jersey Joe. That's not Joe Frazier. I don't think so, is it? It should be Joe Frazier. Oh, maybe it is Joe. I thought Joe Frazier was a Capricorn. I've seen in some charts he's a Capricorn. There's Michael B. Jordan, who is also an Aquarian like his namesake, Michael Jordan. Interesting group of characters. There, of course, is Ellen DeGeneres, who would take over Oprah's position and slot. Again, Aquarius, right? Bill Norman Mailer, the bad boy author, Aquarius. Bill Maher, Aquarius. David Lynch, who had the weirdest fucking video the other day. Totally weird video. Of course, he's David Lynch, Aquarius. Interesting group of people, right? Very interesting. Revolutionary, radical, reformers, inventors, for better or worse. And John Trudell. Well, thank you, Linda wanted me to remind everybody that John Trudell is also an Aquarian. He should be on that list. He should be there before Triple X Station, Triple X, whatever his name is. It's a crime that John Trudell's not on the list. He was a true Aquarian. All right. So I took you down the Aquarian rabbit hole a little bit, showed you a lot of different personalities, showed you some things at a higher level that link some of them together, especially the social engineers. Gene Sharp, and even Dick Cheney is a social engineer too, right? He's a dark social. I mean, they're all dark. And maybe Gene Sharp started off with an idea that, these monolithic structures are not serving the needs of the people. So we're going to create something that's kind of level the playing field, right? We're human. I think we can all relate to that in some ways. But once it gets turned into the thing that, burns in the streets of America in 2020, it's a little bit different. It's a little close to home. All right. I said I'd keep the show short tonight, and I'm going to be a man of my word. We're in here at about a crisp 2 hours. So we'll be back next week. And I'll be back on Tuesday with a look at the astro weather. The beginning of the week, clear skies. Put your pedal to the metal and pump some positivity into your life. In the midst of all this darkness, entropy, and decay, the most radical thing that you can do is to shine a little positive light and some love and some social lubricant Be cool with people. Be, show that Aquarian spirit, even if they don't show it back. I think in the true spirit of Aquarius, practice unconditional like. All right, Jasper, you have anything you want to say to anybody? Oh, really? Is that it? All right. Jasper says good night. Yeah, you can't see him, but he says good night. Oh, I told them that. Yeah, you want to say to them in person? You want to say to them in person? You want to say good night to everybody in person? Huh? What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? You're pretty talkative before, weren't you? I could do like a ventriloquist thing. Wow. 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 No, it says you're mocking me. All right. Thanks for being here. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Your heart to step on what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. And much love to everybody. Mods, thank you very much. Appreciate you all. Check out True Hemp Science. I have an astrology course, which you can find on my website. I do sessions with people. There's a newsletter you can sign up for. And if you want to be a member and support this show and my work without having to get a reading or anything like that, you can do that also on my website at the 11th house. And there's some perks that go along with everything that has different levels of membership. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great Sunday night, a great Monday, a great rest of the week. I'll see you